All right, so today we're going to dive into this idea of the Sigma male.
Okay.
And looks like it's gotten a lot of attention online. You sent over this article called 12 Brutally Honest Reasons Modern Women Struggle with Sigma Males.
Right.
And I mean, it sounds like from the title alone that this is going to be interesting. Have you had a chance to look at this?
Yeah, I took a look at it. Seems like it's really tapping into this whole like cultural obsession with labeling and categorizing everything.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to like masculinity.
Right.
You know?
You know, it's funny you say that because it's almost like this mythical figure, the Sigma male. You know, this article really tries to present them as someone who exists outside of the typical, alpha.
Alpha, beta.
Right, hierarchy. It's like they're playing by a completely different set of rules.
Mm-hmm.
From this article, they're fiercely independent, emotionally self-sufficient, and they seem to be completely immune to drama. It's almost like they just glide through life,
Right.
Not seeking validation from others or trying to climb any sort of social ladder.
Yeah.
They're content with who they are and where they are in life. Is this even real, or is this just like,
Right.
romanticizing a certain type of man?
I mean, that is the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's easy to kind of dismiss all these labels as like oversimplifications.
Sure.
But I do think there is often a kernel of truth behind these archetypes. Like, there are people who genuinely prioritize independence
Right.
and self-sufficiency.
Right.
And who, like, find fulfillment outside of what society might expect of them.
Yeah, I think that's what makes this so interesting, is because they're highlighting how these qualities that could be incredibly attractive, like emotional resilience, self-assuredness, can also be the very things that create friction
Totally.
in relationships. Like, it's so interesting how that works.
Yeah, it's like a double-edged sword in a way.
Yeah.
Because what might come off as strength
Right.
and confidence, in some contexts, could be perceived as aloofness or
Yeah.
emotional unavailability or
Yeah.
even coldness.
Yeah, and this article doesn't shy away from any of that.
Right.
Like, it really dives into these brutally honest
Yeah.
reasons why someone might struggle
Totally.
to connect with a so-called Sigma male. One thing that jumped out to me was this idea that they're unfazed by emotional outbursts.
Oh, yeah?
So imagine you're in the heat of an argument.
Yeah.
Emotions are running high.
Totally.
And the person you're with is just like totally calm and collected.
Right.
What would that even be like?
Well, I think for a lot of people that would be incredibly frustrating,
Yeah.
especially if you are someone who expresses yourself very emotionally.
Yeah.
Like, you can almost feel like the other person isn't taking you seriously.
Right. It's almost like they're not even present in the moment with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, and it kind of goes against our, like, ingrained expectations for how someone should react.
Right.
But what if, instead of it being dismissive, what if it's actually coming from a desire to de-escalate the situation?
Okay.
To, like, approach the conflict from a more rational,
Yeah.
less emotionally charged place.
So it's like they're speaking a different emotional language.
Right, exactly.
I mean, but is there a risk there that this could also be misinterpreted as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Like, their partner's feelings don't really matter to them.
For sure. And that's like the tightrope that they're walking.
Yeah.
Because their intention might be to keep things calm
Right.
and like bring reason into the situation.
Yeah.
But it can unintentionally make their partner feel unheard
Yeah.
or dismissed.
Of course.
It really highlights like how important communication is
Right.
and finding ways to navigate emotional differences.
So it's not necessarily about changing who you are, but more about learning how to communicate
Yeah.
your needs and your intentions in a way that the other person can really hear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it requires like a certain level of self-awareness and emotional intelligence to bridge that gap.
One thing that really stood out to me in this article was this whole idea that they don't chase validation,
Okay.
which on the surface sounds great.
Right.
Who doesn't want to be with someone who's secure and confident in who they are?
Totally.
But how does that actually translate into a relationship?
Right.
Because, like, couldn't that lack of neediness be misinterpreted
For sure,
as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Imagine you're used to getting like a certain level of affirmation
Right.
or reassurance from a partner.
Okay.
And then you picture someone who just doesn't offer those things.
Right.
Not because they don't care,
Right.
but because they genuinely don't feel the need
Wow.
for that external validation.
That would be a very difficult shift, I think, for a lot of people who thrive on those outward expressions. It almost might make you feel like they're not putting in the effort, even if that's not the case.
Exactly. And that's where those misconceptions can pop up.
Right.
Because what might be perceived as coldness or disinterest could actually be coming from a place of like deep self-assurance.
Okay.
And a belief that their love and commitment like that should just be self-evident.
Wow.
Doesn't need that constant validation.
So it's less about them playing games and more about a fundamental difference in how they actually experience love.
Exactly.
It's so fascinating how these seemingly small things can create these really big rifts in understanding each other.
For sure. And that's what I think makes this whole conversation so compelling.
Yeah.
Because it's like it forces us to look beyond just the surface level, you know, to question our assumptions and to recognize that even like the most positive qualities can have these unintended consequences in a relationship. It really is like that saying, you know, what you see is not always what you get.
Right.
And I think we'd be so quick to judge based on just those external behaviors without really trying to understand like what's the motivation behind it.
Yeah, it's a good reminder for all of us to just kind of like take a step back and go, okay, what else could be going on here?
Totally.
You know, before we jump to conclusions, speaking of motivations, this article also talks about how Sigma males can be incredibly loyal.
Okay.
But that their loyalty, it's not just given freely.
Right.
It has to be earned. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept, isn't it? Because it kind of challenges, I think, traditional notions of how we build trust and commitment in relationships. And the article makes it seem like it's not about, you know, going over the top with grand gestures or trying to prove yourself. It's more about like a deeper level of understanding and respect.
So instead of showering someone with gifts or attention, it's more about just like showing up authentically as who you are.
It's about really building that foundation of mutual trust and respect.
Yeah.
And recognizing that like true loyalty, it's not something that can be bought.
You can't force it.
You can't force it.
Right.
It's given freely when you find someone who you feel like really sees you and appreciates you.
And it seems like from this article, they have like this internal radar for anything that feels fake or manipulative.
Yeah.
And they're not afraid to just walk away if they sense that.
Which again can be both like refreshing and intimidating at the same time.
Right.
Totally. Like on one hand, it's like,
oh wow,
this person has a really strong sense of self.
Right.
They knew what they want.
Yeah.
They're not going to settle.
Right.
But on the other hand,
it
can make it really hard.
Yeah, if you're the other person.
Especially like in the beginning.
Right, exactly.
When you're still trying to like figure each other out.
It's like they're playing a different game.
Yeah.
And if you don't know the rules,
well, you're going to lose.
You're going to be lost and confused.
And you're going to wonder like what happened.
Totally. And this is where I think that idea of the unraveling puzzle that the article talks about really comes into play.
Okay.
Because it's like, just when you think you're starting to get them, they reveal some other layer, another like facet of their personality that just draws you in even more.
It's like they're this endless source of fascination.
Totally.
They keep you on your toes, always make you think. But is that just romanticizing a certain type of behavior?
Right.
Or is there something to be said for wanting that?
For
wanting that mystery.
Right, like for embracing the unknown.
Yeah.
Allowing yourself to be surprised by your partner. I mean, that's kind of the beauty of relationships, right? There's no right answer.
Right.
What one person finds exciting, another person might find
exhausting.
Yeah.
It's about finding someone who compliments you.
So how do we know if we're dealing with a genuine Sigma or just someone who's using this as an excuse to not commit or to just not be emotionally available?
Yeah, because the article even says like they can be so hard to read.
Yes.
So how are you supposed to tell?
Right.
I think it comes down to paying attention to their actions.
Okay.
More so than their words.
So look for those consistent behaviors.
Exactly.
Not just the grand gestures or, you know.
Right. Are they actually showing you?
Yes.
Through their actions.
Consistently.
Consistently.
Yeah. I mean, that's so important because sometimes you can get really caught up in what someone's saying versus what they're actually doing.
Exactly.
The article goes into some examples of just like specific scenarios where that sigma male way of thinking
Yeah.
can kind of lead to these misunderstandings
Right.
in relationships. And one that really stood out was the reaction to emotional outbursts.
Right.
So you're having like a disagreement with your partner, and
Yeah.
you're someone who's like, really emotionally expressive, and they're just like totally calm.
Right.
How do you even approach that without feeling completely invalidated?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think in that situation, it's really important to remember
Yeah.
that just because they're not outwardly mirroring
Right.
that same level of intensity
Right.
doesn't necessarily mean that they don't care.
Right.
It might just be their way of trying to de-escalate things.
So it's less about them dismissing their partner
Right.
and more about them trying to be like the problem solver.
Exactly. It's like their way of bringing logic and reason
Right.
to something that feels really emotionally charged.
Almost like that's how they problem solve.
Exactly.
Like their brain just goes there.
It's not to say that it's necessarily better or worse
Right.
than someone who's more emotionally expressive.
Of course.
It's just different.
And I guess that's kind of a theme
Right.
throughout all of this, is like, how do we navigate those differences successfully? So if you're with someone who, reacts that way,
Yeah.
maybe it's about finding a way to sort of speak their language.
Right.
Hey, I know that you're trying to help by staying calm right now,
Right.
but what I really need is for you to just hear me.
Exactly.
Like, just validate what I'm going through. Another thing that we see in this article is this concept of loyalty being earned.
Right.
Which is kind of interesting
Yeah.
because we live in a world where,
Right.
there's all these grand romantic gestures
Right.
and these big declarations of love, and it seems like they're not really looking for that.
It's almost like they're flipping the script on traditional relationship norms.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
They're not looking for someone to come in and complete them
Yeah.
or fulfill some sort of need.
Right. They're not looking for their other half.
Yeah.
They already feel whole
Right.
on their own.
So what does that mean for someone who's interested in them?
Right. It's not about showering them with gifts.
Right.
Or, trying to prove how worthy you are.
Right.
It's about showing up as your most authentic self.
So showing them that you have that same
Right.
self-worth,
Right.
that same independence.
It's about demonstrating that you're not afraid of vulnerability.
Right.
You're not afraid of true connection.
Yeah.
But you're also not willing to compromise who you are
Right.
just to fit in.
Which I think is a great lesson for anybody.
Right.
No matter what type of person they're interested in.
Well, this has been a really fascinating
Yeah.
deep dive, I think,
It has.
into this whole concept. It really does make you think about, just different ways of approaching relationships.
Right. Relationships in general.
And how, even though something might seem a little strange at first,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that it's wrong. Exactly. It's all about perspective, right?
Right. Well, thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We'll see you next time
See you next time.
for another fascinating exploration.